Right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a slightly new look version for the actually for every night stream, but starting here on Monday night. So I hope this one finds you all well. And as you join, you'll see, there's a few changes that we've brought in. I hope you like them, and we've got a lot of stuff to get through. So this is where I do my. Just like the newscasters, I've got my little notes in front of me, and of course, I've got my special guest, Rebecca Butler, who will be joining me very, very, very shortly. But first, we just want to remind everybody that if you enjoy this, we need you to do these things. We need you to, if you're on Facebook watching this, which some of you are, give it the thumbs up as a like, share it, and on YouTube, also give it a thumbs up if you like it. If you don't like it, you can give it the thumbs down. But either way, believe it or not, it's really important. Who knew that thumbs were the way to develop listenerships and viewerships? But apparently it is. So this is what you need to do. So the other things to let you know is that obviously you can follow me on different media channels. Given all the censorship, which we're going to be talking about with Rebecca shortly, you can catch me on Gab in particular, because Parler's not much good because Amazon took it down. You can find my video stuff on Bitchute, which is a growing channel. You can also find me on Rumble, which is another free speech channel. I do a little podcast thing, so you'll be able to on Anchor FM. You can check that out if you want. And on YouTube, of course, you can find me as David Vance, and you can also find me as, or the entity as, Alt News Media. So as you can see there, lots of opportunities to see me. You can be my, I think, what is it they say, friend on Facebook. So you can see there's a Facebook channel there. There's an Alt News Media Facebook channel. There's a lot of stuff. And the other thing that you need to do, by the way, before we kick off is, if you enjoy all this, to make a difference, donate, support free speech whilst it's still here. So you know what to do, altnewsmedia.net/donate, drop a few pounds in the hat if you believe in free speech. Hope you do. Anyway, that's the introductions done. Deep intake of breath. And without further ado, let me bring on, of course, Rebecca Butler. Rebecca.
Hi, David. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all.
Yeah, so you're very welcome, Rebecca. And we got as we were just talking before we went on air, we've got lots to talk about. Not that long to talk about. It's only an hour, but hopefully, folks, you will enjoy the next 60 minutes or so. So, folks, the first topic that, Rebecca, I want to chat about tonight is, free speech, or the censoring of free speech. And as the headline puts it here, I mean, we've got the tech oligarchs at Twitter, at Facebook and Google, and Amazon, actually, for that matter as well, having major impacts in the past 3 or 4 days. And I do want to talk about them because to me it's hugely important that we can speak freely and without fear of censorship. And actually, just on this point, because this is live streaming to YouTube and Facebook, we have to be a little bit careful about what we say. But in due course, Rumble and Parler, if it comes back, and Gab, I hopefully as well, will have live stream opportunities. And that's where you can say the things that you're not allowed to say on this particular channel. Anyway, Rebecca, here is the thing that kicked it all off. Cue image number 1. And this was the tweet that sent a shot around the world, I think, to borrow a phrase. And of course, this was, Rebecca, the suspension of the U.S. president, the sitting, currently elected United States President Donald Trump. And this happened, actually, the reason why he was suspended, Rebecca, which you probably do know, but just so all our people on the stream can see, he made an egregious tweet. And the egregious tweet was that he would not attend the inauguration on the 20th of January. Twitter used that to imply in some regard that this was essentially could be considered encouraging violence. And I think actually there may have been a thing from Twitter. I don't know if you have it. Yeah, this one here. After close review of the tweets from Donald Trump, Twitter Safety have decided to permanently suspend the leader of the free world due to the risk of further incitement of violence. Rebecca, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm an advocate of free speech, and the Democrats are in complete meltdown. I mean, Pelosi did an amazing Oscar-winning performance tonight, where a tear erupts from her eye, saying how close to losing democracy America was when a guy wearing a bullhorn hat marches in on Capitol Hill. And honestly, the French must be just dying laughing. That's not a riot. That's not how the French do it. You need a bit of fire. You gotta make your presence felt. It was all a bit pathetic, actually, what happened. But, and this is a big but, I think it's two separate things. I don't like Donald Trump's style. I don't like some of his attitudes. I find him abrasive. I find him extremely difficult to listen to. I doesn't particularly single him out in my life. Do I think he's done anything out of the ordinary for him? No. Was he inciting anybody? No. Did anybody think he was ever going to go to the inauguration? No. I think it would have been as incendiary to say, I will be going to the inauguration. I think that would have resulted in a meltdown. I think, so many times in life I've seen this, as a nurse, seeing people get suspended for malpractice, and as a barrister representing people who get sacked, they always get them for the wrong thing. Loads of things happen leading up to the final sacking, and it's always the final incident is a bit of it's pathetic. What did he say that incited violence? In my opinion, if I was a judge, nothing. Did he endorse what was going on? Well, only in an act of omission, in that he failed to criticize it at the beginning. But I think when he saw that it was perhaps quite serious and somebody had lost their life, then he sort of did a go in peace. But now you've got the Democrats saying, well, what he should have said was, so they're kind of rewriting their justification. But I mean, they are literally wetting themselves over this. And like a child who's trying to tell on their sibling, the story gets more and more inflated every time it gets told. What was just a rampage of idiots is now, I heard tonight on Channel 4, a well-known right-wing broadcaster, as you know, I heard an American saying it was a terrorist incident. 9/11 was a terrorist incident where 3,500 people died. I don't think 40 people storming into a clearly unsecured Capitol Hill. I don't think that's a terrorist incident. So I think they're loving every minute of it, David. I really do.
Yeah, I think there's several elements to this, Rebecca, some of which you've mentioned. I think for me, if you believe, you either have free speech or you don't. And the Democrats have essentially used their broadcasting wing, which is Twitter, Facebook, and Google, to silence people that they don't like. So that's the first thing. They've been gagging to take Trump down. Let's just be honest in this one. They couldn't wait to get him taken down. And as you say, it was for the most innocuous stuff ever. He has tweeted previous stuff you could potentially take issue with. This wasn't something you could take issue with, but it didn't matter. So there's that. So there's Trump, but it's not just Trump, because it's the whole Trump support system, ecosystem, that's been taken down from Twitter. I mean, they've General Flynn, Lynn Woods, Sidney Powell, and whether you like them or not, doesn't matter. They've all been taken down.
Melania.
Yeah, I think there's about 4 million accounts were removed, Rebecca, over the weekend from Twitter. I heard a figure of 4 million. Not sure how accurate that is. And then the more insidious bit was even that. So, I mean, I'm glad not to be in Twitter. And any accounts related to me are very glad not to be on Twitter. But it's not even that. They weren't happy with that, Rebecca, because a very successful and growing platform is called Parler, which I know in fact you are on. I'm on it. I've had spectacular growth on Parler, and what happened? They agitated, and Amazon pulled the servers on Parler last night. So Parler is currently dead. Whether it comes back, I don't know. Might not. But that's more suppression of free speech, you know. And again, they use this. They say, oh, well, Parler allowed all these awful things on it, you know, all this incitement and whatnot. Hello, has anyone been on Twitter? Has anyone seen the stuff on Twitter? The violence, the death threats, the pornography, the pedophilia, the sheer awfulness of these hypocrites. And that said, Parler's down. Gab is still up, folks. So if you go to Gab, you'll find me there. I've got a growing audience there as well. And this is the thing, Rebecca. It's a bit like, you know, the game Whack-A-Mole, where you whack one down and up pops another one. That's how it's going to be. The leftists who hate free speech in these modern times anyway, don't realize that we will keep popping back up again. So it's a bit pathetic. You used the word pathetic.
I don't think they hate free speech so much as they only want the speech to be the ones that they like. And, you know, the narrative has got to fit. But, you know, what I find really interesting is, you know, as you know, I just like to look outside the borders. And you may recall how Twitter and Facebook were clapping themselves on the back, Facebook more than Twitter, actually, when the Tahrir Square protest took place in Cairo, in Egypt, and that was orchestrated through Facebook. Twitter wasn't that big at the time, but it was orchestrated through social media, and there was a big all-round clap on the back for something that they felt was fitting their agenda. Now let's talk about how many people died at Tahrir Square. You know, so if you're meant to be protecting people's life and limb, then you don't allow orchestration. You don't allow Black Lives Matter to propagate their agenda, their political agenda, on especially Twitter. Now, I know Sasha Johnson has been lifetime banned for calling black guys coons, and quite right too. But you know, it's this. There is no moral equivalence in what they're doing. But I want to go on to push you back a little bit, because free speech is not an absolute right. Free speech is limited, so it's only a partial right. And even under the First Amendment in America, so they will try and justify the limitations on free speech at the point where it could potentially become criminal law. So one of the issues with Twitter and Facebook, and the fact that they are US companies, there are some legal issues at play here, because they're not publishers. And by virtue of them being not publishers, that makes them not liable for damages that might arise out of either libelous acts or death, destruction, famine, swarms of locusts, so on and so forth. So there is an absence of liability. So this categorizes them as not publishers.
Yeah.
And that's quite important, because that is how, and that judgment is how we arrive where we are today, because they remain in private ownership, and therefore they can make up their own rules. So they can chuck off whoever they like, whenever they like. And as a user, We do not have a commercial contract with Twitter and Facebook. We abide by their rules. And if you don't abide by their rules, as they may change them from time to time without notice, if you don't like it, you leave. And if you breach it, you get blocked. We have no commercial contract. There's no consumer contract with Facebook and Twitter. We are mere vehicles for them to make advertising revenue. That is our relationship with Twitter and Facebook. And anything that is going to challenge their ability to market themselves as a platform for their advertisers, anything that either enhances or detracts from that will dictate their commercial decisions.
Okay, so you've pushed back and you've made some very sensible points. And actually, Rebecca, unsurprisingly, I don't really disagree with the thing you said. It's all true regarding...
One thing I didn't say, by the way, I think it's disgusting what they've done. I think it's wrong, totally wrong. And I should have said that right at the start, totally wrong.
But your points are valid nonetheless. However, there's a few other aspects to it which I'd want to sort of say. In the first instance, Twitter set itself up as a free speech platform. You know, it's one thing to set yourself up as something and then okay, you decide because you're allegedly private, but they're on the stock market and they've had public money to support them, by the way, back in when they started up. So they then have obviously changed dramatically their approach, and most particularly the TOS, the terms of service of Twitter, are laughable. And they're almost as laughable as some of these other channels we're currently live streaming on, whereby they define what the rules are and they change them. But you're right, Rebecca. They have in a way, they have that right to do that, as long as they're not pretending to be something that they're not, but they are. And the worst bit of all for me is they all have colluded to take down Parler. Why did they take down Parler? Because they don't agree with Parler. What the hell business is it of Twitter, Facebook, or Google what Parler does? It's none of their business. And Amazon, of course, then went along. And we've seen this before. They all come together and they take down those that they disagree with. And again, to go back to the point, you mentioned it, the Black Lives Matters protests of last summer in the States were widely sympathized with by the Democrats. There was a lot of activity on Twitter, which I saw, suggesting that people go out and show muscle and do all kinds of stuff. We saw the cities burn. 31 people lost their lives last summer. 31, but the media didn't have so much of a problem with that. So, I guess to sum it up, the way I see it, these oligarchs, these multi-billionaires have demonstrated they are more powerful than the President of the United States. And that's something I know, Rebecca, as a free speech advocate, will concern you. It certainly concerns me. It concerns loads of people who will watch this. And it makes you wonder, Rebecca, well, and here's the thing I've sort of question for you. Clearly, if you say the things that they don't like, they will take you down. I mean, ham to me. So, okay, that's the first thing. But here's the more insidious point. What are the things that you don't say because you want to stay on their platforms? And that worries me.
I think it's also, you're beginning to look a bit like China if you've got private companies acting as organs of the state. Because I think a lot of people actually on the far left, as much as on the right, would say, well, the mainstream media doesn't represent me. My bigger alternative, because they've put themselves in the position of mainstream media, is the tech giants, the platforms. That is the media. Yeah. So where do I go? Where's my freedom of assembly? It's not so much freedom of speech, but where's my freedom of assembly in the times of coronavirus? And then, as you know, I have moved from being a lockdown skeptic to a supporter of lockdown. I'm very much pro the vaccination and all of that, which we're not dealing with. But in spite of all of that, I still need to read the skeptical viewpoints on those, because absolutism does not exist. It doesn't exist in science. It doesn't exist in economics. It doesn't exist in politics. So this absolutist view that I'm right and you're wrong can never ever be challenged if you shut people down. I need to read the people on Twitter I don't agree with. I need to read lockdown skeptics. I need to read left wing. I need to read what the Democrats
Yep.
say as much as I need to read what QAnon or Antifa say. And if I want to see what they've got to say, why am I not allowed to do that? I don't need to be nannied into a fairy tale to put me to sleep every night, and that's what's happening.
Yeah, and I think, Rebecca, I mean, but that shows your sense of balance. That whilst you do hold your views, which you know I am diametrically opposed to, but for the same reason, we both like to find out what other people are saying, because that's the only way actually you can really properly engage. So, and when it comes to lockdowns, I mean, you know, I've the BBC to tell me all the good reasons for that under the government, but it is healthy to have a plurality of views. Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube are moving to the point where they will become echo chambers, absolute echo chambers, worthless because of that. They won't allow voices that they don't like to put opinions that maybe you might agree or disagree with, actually. And for me, I think that is a real problem. Your point about it isn't so much about free speech; it is about freedom to assemble in the public square. I think that's a great point. And that's what's been taken away from, I guess, people like me on Twitter. I don't care, but on Parler, I do care. I object in the strongest possible terms what's been done to the Parler guys, who I know. Okay, maybe they should have seen it coming, Rebecca. They should have seen that, oh, you're on Amazon as your servers. Amazon's not exactly, on a neutral player. But thankfully, Gab, by the way, Gab have their own servers. Folks, in case you're watching this, and I think at the moment the platform is being overwhelmed by traffic. I'm seeing a surge in all my numbers and stuff, and that's cranking it over. But I'm sure it'll get there. Also, by the way, there is Gab TV, which I will shortly be on. And there are, Rebecca, apparently I'm told, Gab phone, because as part of all this malarkey, we'll finish this in a sec, Rebecca, we'll get on to you. But the thing, one of the things is that the WhatsApp, which is obviously a very popular, messaging service. I'm sure some of you will have seen, and I've put it up in my Gab. The terms of service are changing there as well, and they're going to start data mining with a vengeance come February. I don't want to have WhatsApp data mining me and trying to figure out, my all my sort of technical details. I don't want that. None of their business. So there are other platforms, folks. I do recommend Signal, which I am now on as well. Simple app, download it, works the same. I think the difference between Signal and WhatsApp is they don't want to data mine you. But you made the great point, Rebecca, and it's one that's not off me, that's really not given focus enough. These organizations, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, their business models require the platforms to amend themselves in a particular way to appeal to business. And so if you get, right-wing people coming on saying things, well, that might upset some of the woke corporations out there, as we've seen. And so it goes, doesn't it? It's that point where I don't believe any of these platforms are about free speech or free assembly.
No,
they're not.
That's how they get you to sign up. I mean, even, I know Parler's CEO has spoken to Bezos today about it, and he is pursuing them under a consumer contract. Good for him, but, massively exposed. I mean, what I've just finished this off, if I may, just make a couple of points. It's all very well the tech giants, wielding their axe on people, but we do have to remember that, okay, it might not affect you or me personally, but people make their money on these platforms. A lot of people rely on it entirely for their livelihood, and that might be a few pounds a day that makes a difference to people's lives. And there are people who are very emotionally engaged in their platforms and curate them over many years. So it is a devastating emotional thing to some people to be removed from the platforms. And I think, a kinder, caring recognition of those people is also important. But finally,
Yeah.
are we going to just move to a subscription-based service where we pay to have a platform, £2 a month? We pay to have a platform, and we have an arrangement with that platform. We have a consumer contract with that platform that says you will observe the law on free speech, and you will not, for any reason, exert any political input over this. And we'll have an independent arbiter to decide whether you can
Yeah.
take me down or not. And I think that is the natural progression. It's almost where the BBC is going to, is subscription model, is that you choose
Yeah.
the terms that you want from your provider. Because God, people were so surprised with the Cambridge Analytica story. They were really surprised to realize that Facebook owned their data, because
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah.
you are the commodity as the user. No, you're not buying a commodity. You are the commodity. You are the person who consents to being a commodity.
And I think yeah, Rebecca, that's a great point. I think there's loads of people I would happily pay voluntarily to the likes of Gab or to Parler to help support them, monthly fee, which would give them that financial independence, which really I'm not really sure how their business model in any other way works. But on a positive final note, I believe I saw a figure. Twitter's share price hasn't been that particularly good today. I think I said it was 5 billion have been wiped off. I'm sure what's 5 billion between multi-billionaire oligarchs, but it's still nice to see, because people ultimately, Rebecca, and it's the same with the BBC, people vote with their feet. So if at the end of the day, if Twitter remove voices, which, like, President Trump had 88 million followers. Whether we like him or not, it's immaterial. Loads of people like to hear him. He's not there anymore, so they will go and try and find him. And from my own personal experience, they went to find me elsewhere as well. People like to hear that plurality of opinion. If they can't get it on Twitter, they'll find somewhere else to get it.
But then that radicalizes people, you see, because you end up running down rabbit holes to find the voices you want. And because the evil set in much further back the stream, you don't achieve anything just by keeping opening up platforms, because you'll end up just opening more and more and more. It'll just get worse and worse and worse. And ultimately, in 50 years' time, we'd be a deeply uninformed populace, because there is no independent thought, there's no independent expression, there's no ability to meet people to discuss. And I think this is one of the side effects of a pandemic, is the ability to lose democracy and democratic values really, really quickly, and then you never quite recover them.
Well, that's right. That's one of the reasons I oppose lockdowns, because once freedoms are taken, and we both know this, and everyone understands this, they are given back reluctantly, if ever, by the political class. Anyway, we leave it, Rebecca, for tonight. That's the big tech guys. Rebecca, the next story we want to cover, and we've got about 30 minutes to cover it. This will be the final story. Is Nigel Farage's Reform UK Party. And folks, you may have seen some of this. There's a couple of slides here we're going to bring up, Rebecca, with just the announcement that former Tory MSP Michelle Ballantyne, I think, is the Scottish leader. So do you want to talk us through this one, Rebecca? Because I think you made some really interesting points to me about it. So over to you.
Yeah, so this was a story that caught my attention today because Richard Tice announced that he was going to do this big reveal at 11 o'clock on a live stream, and so he was on Twitter and Facebook, and they revealed that Michelle Ballantyne had moved over as a Tory into the Reform Party. Now, what I found interesting was that their big reveal has actually started in Scotland. And I sort of sat down and pondered this and thought about it. And I have to say, I think the Reform Party kind of lost its way because they stood back for the general election. They allowed Brexit to happen through the Tories because they had confidence in Gove and Boris and Rab. So they knew the top team were leaders. They knew they had the Spartans in the ERG. So they knew that they could drive Brexit through. And Nigel Farage had said, quite honestly, that's it, me done, job done.
Yeah.
But then, of course, it became obvious as we went through the May premiership that perhaps his job wasn't done and somebody needed to supervise it. That's how the Brexit Party came up. But then at the beginning of this year, it became increasingly obvious that the role of the Brexit Party was over. So the individuals were either going to disappear under the Brexit Party, or those individuals had got a taste now for politics and being a steroid-induced, supercharged activist party were going to take on another mantle. Now, I think that Farage and Tice fell apart a little bit over lockdown. Because Richard Tice is more of an anti-lockdown, and Nigel Farage is very much more in line with what the government's saying, and, as you know, very pro-vaccination, actually endorsed what Tony Blair said about vaccinations, which, by the way, I did. So I think they did lose their way a little bit. But Nicola Sturgeon is a real problem, I think, for democracy. Yeah. Nicola Sturgeon thinks nothing about taking UK taxpayers' money in coronavirus relief funds and virtue signalling that she's going to give £500 to each nurse in the Scottish NHS, which is, in my opinion, a complete misappropriation of funds. If anybody needs money, it's the private sector, not the public sector.
Right. Yep.
And I'm sorry if you think nurses aren't paid enough, but by the way, they did apply for the job and they knew that what they were taking on. Thank you very much for what you've done for coronavirus, but you have actually done what you're paid to do, just like the army gets paid to go to war. And when it gets to go to war, you don't suddenly think they're wonderful people. They're doing their job and they are professionals, and they don't need to be paid extra, by the way, for doing their job. But there are sectors in Scotland that are falling down flat. And I don't think she has a right to take our taxpayer money and hand it to their NHS, which they have completely screwed up. So, but she's a shockingly bad politician in terms of delivery, but a genius master tactician. She's made of Teflon, that woman. She can do anything to the people of Scotland, and she gets more and more popular. So the other side of this is that where the hell is the Labour Party in Scotland? Now, what brought Tony Blair and Gordon Brown their massive majorities in 97, 2003 and 2006, was Scotland. Labour relies on Scotland for a big UK parliamentary majority. Scotland has lost its Labour votes, completely lost them. They've all gone to the SNP. But, as I've always said, in that referendum in 2016, 38% of Scots voted to leave the EU. 38%. That's a lot. And they were always ignored. They were silent. It's also believed, but I've never seen a poll that can support what I'm saying. It's always believed that they were by and large pro-unionist. Now, 38% is a big number, and I quite often hear the SNP saying a lot of Brexit Scottish voters are now pro-IndyRef too. I don't know.
Don't believe it.
The last poll we have on IndyRef is 55-45 in favour of the union. So Labour's policy to get its voters back, Labour's policy has got to be, we'll have an IndyRef. But if we lost the IndyRef and lost Scotland, that is Labour voting as a turkey for Christmas. It's an incoherent policy.
Yeah.
And reform, any Tory who's worried about Reform UK needs to sit up. This is a bigger problem for the Labour Party because it will guarantee they never see a parliamentary majority in Westminster ever again. Never.
Yeah.
I put my money on it.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, so just to come in on a couple of those points, you're absolutely right, Rebecca, that Labour can never get into power again unless they regain the foothold that they had in Scotland. It was those Scottish MPs that secured Blair and Brown, and actually for a long time, core to the to Labour's ability to govern. However, the SNP have absolutely supplanted Labour. Labour is they're reduced to nothing, and the Tories have been spectacularly unsuccessful in really making any significant breakthrough, despite the fact that you made, and I see somebody put it up here, that I mean only a third of the Scottish electorate voted for the SNP. What about the other 2/3? Is there nothing that they could sort of unite around? Because if they had something that could challenge the Sturgeon hegemony. The Sturgeon hegemony, by the way, which is absolutely and ultimately facilitated by the spineless Scottish media, which are even worse than the English media in terms of being lickspittles to the administration.
The BBC's a lickspittle to Sturgeon. They're terrible.
Yeah, in Scotland, BBC Scotland, the Scotsman. You check out the organs in Scotland. No, not the broader UK scene. But even the BBC, hang on, BBC, don't see them being overly critical and and Nicola. However, I think that chap Alex Salmond caused her a little bit of a trouble in the last. We're not going into that, Rebecca, particularly, but it's interesting. But listen, the point is, here's the thing. So do you think that the Reform Party actually could, in Scotland in particular, do you think it could make a breakthrough to those voters?
Every single fisherman in Scotland will vote for Nigel. I don't know what colour the Reform Party is. Let's say it's purple. I don't know. In the next election, there'll be a purple band around the coast of Scotland in the local elections. Nigel will get the fishermen, and Sturgeon has got a problem. She either gets rid of them and says, okay, fine, I don't care because I've got 40% of the vote for the SNP. That's big enough. I don't actually, in a first past the post system, I don't actually need more. I'll waste it. I'll let them have it. And we'll just point out they're all a load of racists. And so, you know, Farage could really pick up in the fishing communities. But also, we have a situation in places like Edinburgh Central and Aberdeen South, which are both Tory constituencies, because we still do have a couple of Tory MPs there.
Yeah.
So, and there's a good cohort of MSPs at Holyrood as well. But I think they could lose their seats. So, is Nigel going to pick up the Labour vote? Because a lot of Scots just can't bring themselves to vote for the Tories. Those that did in the last election only did so to get Brexit done. But if they'd had a Brexit party candidate in the fishing areas, but Nigel made no inroads into Scotland at all with the Brexit party. He didn't even try with Scotland.
Why do you think that was?
I think he wanted to be a proper challenge to the Tory party, but in the law of unintended consequences, what actually happened was that the so-called red wall seats fell away from Labour, and in my opinion, they'd have voted for a cocker spaniel as long as it was a party that promised to deliver Brexit.
Yeah.
The Labour red wall, I don't think gave a damn whether it was Brexit party or Tory party. But because of our voting system, Nigel, who ain't stupid, worked out that in order to get Brexit done and not be seen to destroy Brexit, he had to get the Tories in. But of course, that was a Tory Labour fight. When it came to Scotland, he left Scotland alone because of the arithmetic of the seats. I think there's only one, which is Buchan, which is up near Inverness. That was one constituency that had a 70% leave vote. So he was quite nervous about putting contenders in Scotland. But now what he's doing, I think, is really clever. I can't wait to see what happens, because I think he could make a difference.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier one of the most sort of galling things, and I think about this as a unionist, because if you're trying to sustain the United Kingdom, which I kind of want to do, or I'd like to try, any of do, Sturgeon's a massive problem because she's sponging off the English taxpayer and the generosity of actually Westminster, for that matter, as are we in Northern Ireland, by the way, but not as overtly. She takes all this cash and then she splurges it on her favourite, hobby horses. And as you rightly point out, Rebecca, she's crap at delivery. She's absolutely hopeless. I mean, Scottish education, once, I guess, the envy of the world, or at least, people really look at Scottish education. Look at what's happened there. Shocking. She gets away with it. And she does seem to be kind of Teflon-esque, even more so than Salmon, although he was Teflon-esque except towards the end when it got awkward. But
he lost the Mindy ref, you see. So I think if you asked an SNP supporter now, who do you prefer, Salmond or Sturgeon? And oh, by the way, Salmond falsely accused of multiple sexually motivated, incidents and acquitted in a court of law by a jury of his peers.
Yeah.
Or the person who very clearly lied to the Parliament and stitched them up. Who do you prefer? And they still say Sturgeon. I mean, what she's done over this whole Salmon thing has been disgusting. Her husband, they've all got blood on their hands over this. It is absolutely disgusting, and it shows them up to be the pretenders and charlatans that they actually are. Her policies are shocking. Her NHS has got one of the worst death rates from COVID in Europe, therefore in the world. Education, awful. Public services, awful. Poverty, awful. Drug addiction, awful. They love her.
It is the problem in Scotland for Conservatives? Is it that, of course, one of the politicians I most admired was Margaret Thatcher. However, is the Thatcher legacy, from a Scottish point of view, is that a bit toxic? Is that what keeps Scots from walking away from the SNP cult, do you think? Or is that really not a thing?
I have a bit of a radical idea here. I've only just thought of it as you asked me that. I actually think relative poverty will dictate your vote. And I think the more relative poverty or less aspiration you have, the more likely you are to go for a statist authoritarian regime that just thinks you need to carry on taxing. If you look at Donald Trump and his success, what was his success? Put away drain the swamp, okay? Put away all of that. What was his success? His success was knowing that people, their dollar wasn't going far enough.
Yeah.
Their salary was being munched up in relatively low taxes, by the way. The Americans are an extremely low tax economy, but he wanted to slash taxes even more. And he actually was very pro-business, and he set out his case really well. If I tax businesses, they won't be able to employ you. So I'm going to make sure you get employed while simultaneously making sure you have more dollars in your purse at the end of the month. So he provided succor to poor people. But Maggie did as well. Maggie said to people, fine, you didn't go to Eton, you didn't go to Oxford, it doesn't matter. I've shown you can kick the establishment in the backside, go out, work hard, make your own money. So people under Maggie, they knew they had something to aim for, and she was pro low taxes. So I honestly think this is maybe completely controversial, and I don't mean to offend, but I think the more relative poverty there is, the more likely there's going to be a more left-wing authoritarian vote catch.
I don't think that's remotely controversial. If you look at the SNP strong votes, which a lot of their votes concentrated in Glasgow, and if you look at the areas of greatest poverty, those are the people who are loyal to Nicola, and then, and when you go then, Rebecca, into other parts, because Scotland's a lot more than just the central belt, then you find there's not the same SNP cult like fanaticism, because those people, relatively speaking, are that that bit more money in their pocket. So I think that's a reasonable point. But it would be so great to be able to basically shaft the SNP, because some of us think that if they're not taken out, she will destroy the UK. I mean, I know lots of English people like yourself, Rebecca, who are very reasonable people, and they're unionists. And I think we've talked about this in a previous stream. But the annoyance of Sturgeon is so great that there's a great temptation to go, I'll tell you what, just sod off. Just go, leave it.
This is the problem, and this is why a lot of us were saying at the time of devolution, this has only got one end point. And, I thought all of Gordon Brown and Tony Blair's constitutional reforms were awful. I thought they were absolutely terrible. And I just thought devolution was a really expensive vanity project. But the thing with Nicola Sturgeon, I mean, if you look at life expectancy as a predictor of relative poverty, the Scottish life expectancy is something like 5 years less than ours in England. So, you're looking at a par with Uganda or somewhere, or India for life expectancy in a part of the UK. And she blames the Tories for it.
This is a country where a deep-fried Mars bar is considered a delicacy, Rebecca. Are we entirely surprised that life expectancy is somewhat less than in other parts of the UK? But you're right. She blames everything on the Tory government in Westminster. And a lot of people are gullible enough, to swallow that. And the people least well off are the ones who swallow it the most. But so, do you think the Reform Party's appeal would be then to those parts? I mean, outside those SNP heartlands, Do you think that's where the appeal lies? And do you think that that could become significant in the next whatever?
I think they'll snitch the Labour voters. I think, that the voters who voted for Tony Blair, I think they will go to Reform. I think the Leavers will go to Reform as a credible group. Because, the alternative for Scotland, I can see the writing on the wall now. Me and my crystal ball, David. What's going to happen is Nicola will drive Boris into a cul-de-sac, and she will bang on about a referendum and nag and nag and nag and cause further division until he pays her more money. And that's not his money, that's our money. And there's only so much money to go around, so you'll get less in Northern Ireland, because let's face it, you only got a bonanza because Theresa May needed Arlene Foster's support. So, he will give her more money to shut her up, and she will squander it, as they have for the last 20 years since they first evolved. She'll spend it on new furniture in their ridiculous assembly, in Hollywood. They don't. Why do they need more political structures in Scotland? Which Scottish person woke up and thought, oh, do you know what? I've got enough politics in my life. What I need is more. Who ever woke up and thought that? But he'll give her money. He'll buy her to shut up. But she won't stop being divisive, because that's how she made her popularity. She's addicted to it.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And the thing is, I know lots of very sensible Scottish people. In fact, I actually know some Scottish people in Glasgow, or maybe not central Glasgow, but in and around Glasgow, and they're sensible enough, and they despise her. I mean, the levels of hatred towards Nicola Sturgeon are actually quite high. But there's never been anything really that can kind of that can be turned into a catalyst for effective opposition to Nicola Sturgeon. Maybe this will be it, because if nothing else, the Reform Party would then have done the UK a great service, wouldn't it?
Well, you see, if you look more recently, the more contemporary analysis of this is what happened to the Liberal Democrats at the last election. They've just disappeared completely in Scotland now. At one point, they were quite strong in Scotland because they were, they were the moderate counterpoint to Labour. So Lib Dems have had their day. Where are these voters gone? Because I don't believe that there was never a Brexit voting Liberal Democrat supporter. I don't believe that there aren't pro-Brexit anti-unionists. I can't believe there are pro-Brexit pro-unionists. People over stereotype the voter base, but where do these voters go? And when your bog standard, man on the Clapham omnibus is told, look at the shit show that Scotland's education and NHS services are compared with the rest of Britain, come on, guys, open your eyes. Why are you voting for this? Why are you allowing this horrible, divisive politics to ruin your country?
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, I've seen somebody on the stream pointed out, Rebecca, sort of as a sideline to the NHS thing you just mentioned in Scotland, like the drug problem in Scotland, and I think someone said the heroin abuse in Scotland. It's remarkably high, and again, that's not. I mean, Saint Nicola doesn't carry culpability for that apparently, and yet she's always announcing initiatives. I've noticed this, lots of initiatives around drugs, and all that happens is the problem seems to get worse.
Well, I mean, according to my son who lives in Glasgow, he reckons that there is a vast swathe of society that is completely undocumented in Scotland. People who don't go to the GP, because they're 25, 26. People who do live on the black market. They're not signed up for universal credit. They live in the tenements on the east side of Glasgow. They are the undocumented people. And he thinks
Yeah.
it's worse in Glasgow than anywhere he's ever lived. And, you know, he says to me, Mummy, you know, people can die and nobody knows about it. You know, there's no, all this money spent on the organs of government. The government is incompetent, and things like drug abuse are a sign of poverty, lack of employment, lack of opportunity, and lack of effective policing, lack of, you know, community policing. Scotland is the murder capital of the country. It's the drug capital of the country. It's now the suicide capital of the country. Low life expectancy. All these are poverty indicators. But hang on, we gave them all that money to run their own country. Like, you've screwed up. You can't do it, guys.
And yet all they do is they come to Westminster and they complain and they whinge and they talk about the fact that the discrimination against Scotland. It is quite remarkable. And it does show, actually, to my mind, that appeasing the SNP only makes the SNP stronger. But it seems to be what Conservative administrations try to do. They try to buy her off, basically, or whoever's leading the SNP off. Although it'd be interesting to think, do you think she can survive the, let's call it the Salmon
Gate.
Salmon Gate, yeah. What do you think?
I hope not, but I think, yeah, she's Teflon coated. She'll survive anything. Everything slips off her. Because you know what? The wording of the statute is, did she deliberately mislead? So she'll say, well, I may have misled, but it wasn't deliberate. She'll find somebody to blame for it.
Yeah, yeah.
And Salmond is, it's bizarre, isn't it? He is pushing to demonstrate that she lied to Parliament about whether she knew he was fiddling with people. I mean, you couldn't, what? It's just such a bizarre situation. He'll see her hanged over his misdemeanors. It's brilliant.
Oh, it is. It's an absolute pleasure. Final question, actually, just on this. Do you think the Reform Party could constitute a threat to Boris in England?
No. No.
This is, I think, last September in The Spectator, no less, Rebecca, we had this article being written, Farage's Reform Party won't succeed, but may end Boris's time as PM. I'm not sure. That was November when the whole thing was being speculated upon and talked about. But you don't believe then that Reform can break through in England?
No, I think there will become a pro-unionist opposition to Nicola Sturgeon. The Tories failed because of Brexit. Brexit scuppered the Scottish Tories. Brexit has now scuppered the Labour Tories, the Labour Scots as well. So no, I think Nigel's quite right to go up to Scotland. I think it's a brilliant move. He may even go to Wales, which was very pro-Brexit. And he may edge out Labour in Wales. He may well do that. And you know what? We need him in Northern Ireland to get rid of those lefty Sinn Féin MPs as well. We could do with a few more, alternative voices to how the hell did you get Sinn Féin in so many seats?
Yeah, there actually is a tranche of support for Nigel Farage. I mean, the thing about Farage is, he's a bit Marmite as well. Some people love him, some people loathe him. But I can tell you over here as well that there is, there's certainly pockets of people that I know of in certain constituencies who would be very interested in this idea. And I think he didn't do himself. You mentioned, I'll disagree with you on this one, just though, Rebecca. I know people here who big Farage supporters, blah blah blah. They were seriously miffed at his suggestion that Tony Blair should be put in charge of vaccines. Whether you agree with the issue or not, it's just Tony Blair is another figure. They're all Marmite, aren't they, Rebecca? Maybe.
Well, yeah, I mean, Tony Blair is such a toxic brand.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be quoting him, but I mean, the only thing that Tony Blair said, which I agree with, if you agree with vaccination, then do 5 million a week, guys. 2 isn't enough, because when we come to the 3-month point, we're going to have delivered 5 million vaccines to 2.5 million people, and we've already vaccinated 2.5 million people, so that they're going to be having their second vax. So the whole thing will stall in a few weeks' time. We should be having multiple vaccination portals and up it to 5 million, because it would still take till the summer to do that. It's going to take 20 weeks minimum.
Rebecca, I bring you the shocking news that Chris Davis has had to 3 times tonight. He's been in agreement with what you've said. I think he's been going to have a drink.
Lock him. You're off, Chris. Go on. Banned from the platform. You can't agree with me.
Yeah, I will now do my Jack Dorsey number and ban people who I don't like. But yeah, it'll be very interesting to see, Rebecca, what happens north of the border. And this is a story we'll keep on top of. Unfortunately, we haven't the time to tackle another topic tonight, which I'm sure we'll get to on another occasion, which is essentially lockdown and education. Because I think I would like to chat to you about that, because whilst I know you're in favour of lockdown, I know you've also got concerns about the impacts of that on kids and their education, even on actually teachers and then parents, and there's a big topic.
I go much further than that. I just think education should be excluded from lockdown, full stop. I'm zero tolerance on that. So I'm a complete keep education open all the way through up to university. Find a way around how to do it and how to do it properly. Keep those schools open. This is deeply damaging.
As you say, Rebecca, I mean, it's a really good topic as well, because for me, it's like I see the GCSEs and the L levels have been cancelled. So there's something bigger happening to education in the United Kingdom, and it's not a good thing. I can't believe that stopping kids getting a decent education, especially working class kids as well, I might add. These are people who can prosper and can get up the ladder and make a real good life for themselves. And I talk to teachers, Rebecca, and I hear all kinds of despair, actually. Not all teachers want to be sitting at home on a Zoom call. Some of them want to be in a classroom talking to kids, doing their job. And I'm with them. But anyway, the thing is, Rebecca,
it's child protection as well as education. I'm afraid to say that's a fact, that the teachers are frontline child protection as well, and we have
that's a good point. I mean, as I say, Rebecca, I think we'll put this one in the reserve for another evening. But that's it for tonight. So I hope everyone has enjoyed the new format tonight. And as always, it's a pleasure to have Rebecca on the stream. So thank you, Rebecca, for being here. I will be returning tomorrow night, folks, with an American Hindu lady called Purnima Nath, who's a prominent, she was a Trump supporter, probably still is. And we're going to talk about life on the other side of the pond with all the stuff that's going on. So please join me tomorrow night when she comes on the stream. But again, my thanks to Rebecca tonight. Thanks to all you folks. And with that, I will bid you all adieu, adieu, adieu. And we'll recommence battle tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Be there or be square. Bye from me.
Bye. Bye, everybody.